Welcome everyone to Snorkel Science Talks, a series where we interview AI thought leaders and discuss themes around making machine learning practical. I'm Braden Hancock, one of the co-founders at Snorkel AI, and today we're delighted to be joined by Sebastian Ruder, a research scientist at DeepMind and the creator of the popular monthly NLP newsletter. Thank you so much for joining us, Sebastian.
Thanks so much for having me.
I mean, one of the great services that you do for the world, I know I certainly look forward to it each month, is the NLP newsletter that I mentioned before. What was the origin of that? What led you to start creating that, and how's it been since?
Thanks so much. Firstly, I'm glad really that you found it helpful in the past. I think for me the main impulse or the main motivation was really to somehow find I thought there was some medium or some void left between kind of the more rapid kind of fire, more anecdotal communication that we have on Twitter, or kind of a lot of the highlights there, which are very, very disparate or sometimes hard to make sense of, and the more kind of regular conference publications, which are still, which are maybe if you're in the field doing research in exactly that area, you know about, but then probably also just about your subfield. And for people just wanting interest in NLP, it's very hard to make sense of those. So I just wanted to try to find some way in making combining the best of both of those platforms and finding some way to make that kind of information and maybe some trends or highlights more accessible in kind of more regular cadence, essentially. And that turned into this NLP newsletter, which has been, I think, going on for the better part of 2 years now. I took a small break last year, just in a bit of a low point in terms of productivity, but generally have been trying since then to basically compiling some interesting observations or trends or highlights.
Yeah. Well, and I've described the newsletter before to some as it's a summary of summaries, right, or a survey of surveys, because so many of the leads that you point to end up being this other whole additional set of references to follow, and I can spend all day basically doing a depth first search through the newsletter. So that's a lot of new content every month. Where are your sort of input feeds? You mentioned Twitter. I know you're also deeply involved in a lot of the conferences. Anything else that contributes, you'd say, regularly to the content that you're gathering?
I would say probably Twitter is, I think, the number one source. I think until a while ago it was also kind of Archive, one of the Archive digests, so either Archive Sanity or Archivist or something like that, which I've even with those I kind of failed to keep up recently as well. And then just recommendations or things that come up in discussions with colleagues or other people in the field. And I've tried out a few kind of other aggregation services. There have been some great recent ones in the ML space, but generally I've always come back to just this feed and this fire hose of Twitter, and just trying to get out what I can from there.
Isn't it amazing how much of a role Twitter has come to play in the ML community? I mean, I ultimately ended up getting a Twitter account some number of years ago, as a work tool, because I felt like there are conversations you'll just miss out on, and highlights that you just won't see if you're not there.
Yeah, I think it's really great what kind of the discussions you can observe and participate in Twitter, and really this just this general accessibility that here's a forum, a space where you can have one-on-one conversations with the leaders of in the field. So I think it's really a great venue, particularly for people just getting into the field to get their toes wet, or to also get to know and connect with people.
Yeah, no, the ultimate ongoing 24/7 poster session.
Pretty much, yeah.
So let's move on to another one of the repositories that you contribute to regularly. There's an NLP progress repo, right, that has a whole bunch of different categories or subjects within NLP, and you'll list some of the top data sets and basically the current best performance achieved on those. And we've seen this shift, I'd say, in recent years from the community to focus and really appreciate more the value of data sets and benchmarks in driving progress forward. There's also, of course, been some pushback at times that, collectively as a field, we end up overfitting to a specific test set, maybe wasting a certain amount of time and money and carbon indexing on, the oddities or peculiarities of just a single set. Though, of course, I'd say overall the consensus is that this has been a very helpful exercise. What do you, in your opinion, what are some of the properties of the tasks and benchmarks that end up being the most fruitful for the community in the end?
Um, okay, yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think it depends on your measure of like fruitfulness or what is really like usefulness for the community. So I think probably, I mean, if you would look like objectively in terms of the number of citations, general interest that has accumulated, um, I would say recently, really benchmarks that cover not just like that focus on like general purpose systems or general purpose representation learning. So probably, yeah, recently like Glue and its successor SuperGLUE. So these collections of existing benchmarks which try to yeah, test essentially general natural language understanding by evaluating a model on multiple existing benchmarks and then looking at kind of the average of scores. Typically, I think they have um, yeah, can be credited with really catalyzing or driving a lot of this recent progress in unsupervised pre-training and representation learning in NLP. In addition, I would say that kind of any yeah, any data sets that try to test for interesting capabilities in the model or things that identify like a setting where yeah, current models don't do well on and really try to create collect high quality data for such a setting. So for instance, from like I think 2019, a lot of the data sets there that I was most excited about were ones focused on common sense reasoning, some of which have been created by the University of Washington, which really collected very useful data for a challenging setting, which was previously not that easy to evaluate. Um, but beyond that, I mean, I think the nice thing about NLP Progress or similar repositories like Papers with Code as well is that they can kind of help you to explore and surface data sets that you might not have been aware of before. So one thing I really like about the general NLP landscape in particular is that this whole space of modeling natural language and understanding language is so vast that it really allows you or enables a lot of different tasks and a lot of different applications. Um, so looking, yeah, like from standard ones like recognizing entities in text to maybe more esoteric ones like classifying different content on forums in the dark web or doing domain adaptation in that setting, to doing information extraction from tables or natural language generation based on football reports. So yeah, so generally I think it's really cool that there's such a wide space of possible tasks. And I think if you like, if people are interested in a certain setting that hasn't been really been studied or have find some way of improving like a niche task, I think that has a lot of value in and of itself as well, even though it might only be of interest to a smaller subset of the community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's what you mentioned there's key. The fact that these are all in one place that makes it easy to explore and sort of try on a lot of different settings and setups all at once. That does exactly what you would hope of keeping a person from focusing too much on just the one data set and looking for more broadly applicable, broadly usable, generalizable approaches. Um, so then, another area where I'd say we're seeing an increasing appreciation in the community, and one that I know you've also been involved in, is NLP beyond English, right? There's a lot of different facets to that, and you've written about that as well, and that of course resonates with us a lot at Snorkel because just we were very much in this mindset where the data is what drives progress, and on these low resource languages, if there just aren't training data sets, it can be very, very difficult to create high quality systems there. And so there you end up generating training sets programmatically. You're doing data augmentation or transferring expertise from other domains, and there's all sorts of things that people will try, but very much an active area of research. So from a very practical nuts and bolts perspective, what have you seen so far that in your opinion is really working well when it comes to trying to support ML for some of these lower resource languages?
Yeah, so yeah, good question again. So firstly, or kind of all things considered, I think it's really if you don't have any assumptions, quite surprising how well kind of the current generation of models, so large pre-trained transformer models that have been trained on really large amounts of text from the web, how well these approaches can do often in a zero-shot setting for because most of the training data um, is in English, but recently people have trained approaches not only in English but on data covering many different languages. So current approaches cover about 100 different languages in terms of pre-trained data, and even though this training data is generally quite like just monolingual, unlabeled data on the text, so you don't actually tell the model, okay, these words are translations of each other in different languages, or these sentences correspond to each other in different languages. Still, the models are able to figure out or to capture some understanding or some understanding about the like cross-lingual equivalence between languages to some extent, and do reasonably well when you just when you train them in one language and then transfer them at test time to a different language. And I think that that in of itself, if you would have or if someone would have shown to me those results maybe a couple of years ago, I would have really been very surprised about. Um, so I think already, yeah, kind of with large pre-trained models, there's been very substantial improvements. But again, like we've seen with kind of other capabilities or like phenomena also in the monolingual setting, if a model doesn't see things very frequently during training, it will generally not be able to develop such a deep understanding of it. And the same thing applies to other languages as well. So simply languages which are underrepresented during pre-training, for which there's not a lot of unlabeled data available, the model will generally do a lot worse on in terms of transferring to them.
Mm-hmm. Is there a language that you've worked with that you've found to be most fun or most challenging to develop over?
Yeah, so I mean, this is like another, so one reason or another aspect why I think working on like multilingual NLP or like cross-lingual learning is quite interesting, because across this, like the space of human languages, you really encounter so many, like, yeah, so many different variations, so many, yeah, interesting phenomena that's really hard to, yeah, hard to grasp or hard to capture them all. So I think like in a recent paper, we try to focus specifically on I think one of the most challenging settings, which is looking or trying to learn about and transfer to languages which, so firstly, the model has not seen during pre-training. And secondly, the model also has not seen the script of that language. So generally with a lot of languages in the world, or well, at least a lot of the languages we are used to, they're written in Latin script. So even if you have never, or even if the model has never seen that language before, it might still be able to infer some knowledge based on knowledge of cognates, so words that have similar meaning, or that might exist or co-occur as like proper names, or uh, yeah, just names of cities or place names in other in other languages. But if you have completely disjoint different scripts, yeah, you can't simply do this kind of lexical transfer. So yeah, one of those interesting languages is Amharic, for instance, which is an African language, quite a large, like millions of speakers there, but really generally understudied in NLP. And with that, if you just naively apply models such as multilingual BERT to it, you get essentially random performance because the model is not able to decode anything about the language. So you really need some different strategies or a different set of methods to learn with it.
Excellent. All right. We'll wrap up now with our last questions. Where can interested listeners find you on the internet? What are the best places to get your latest work?
So generally on Twitter, obviously, and yeah, you can find me on my website as well, which is ruder.io. And yeah, if you're interested to staying up to date about ML and NLP, yeah, you can also check out my newsletter, which is on can be found on that website as well.
Awesome. And we'll link to all those as well when this is posted. So I think that'll do it for us. Thanks so much, Sebastian. A lot of wonderful topics covered today, and looking forward to sharing this.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me.